On this week's Overwatch This, we're talking about Lucio going absolutely bananas over on the PTR in patch 1.10. Meanwhile, in patch 1.9, Orisa has arrived. Hello and welcome to episode 25 of Overwatch This. I am Phil and with me is Ben.
Hello.
Overlord of Overwatch. 25 episodes, Ben.
25 episodes of overlording it up.
What do you get when you've had 25 years in marriage?
You get a Lucio patch. Interesting,
because that, by sheer coincidence, that's exactly what's happened in Overwatch this week. So, patch 1.10, right, is live on the PTR.
It is, yes.
Lucio has gone absolutely bananas.
He's gone, it's a bit mental.
It's
just a little bit mental.
Bouncing all over the place. Tell me about it, Ben.
So, we were talking about this last week a little bit, because Kaplan sort of teased it during his AMA, and even the week before we were saying how, okay, they're fixing Ana, what about Lucio? He's, as picked, as ubiquitous as she is, and for, similarly obvious reasons, where he's just way too good at healing a team all at once. So, the Overwatch team clearly listened to us, specifically us, and went, okay, well, we've played that Titanfall game, that's quite good, let's just make him that. And so, that's pretty much where Lucio's at now. He can wall run at super speeds. Every time he jumps off a wall, he gets a boost in speed, and it stacks. And that's so it's stacking is the bit where it goes really crazy, because there's already slightly weird stuff with the way Lucio's wall ride is coded that I don't think is deliberate. They just sort of left in there because it was never really a problem, and because it's cool. Running along very short surfaces, being able to jump between poles on maps like that, or jumping between two walls that are perpendicular to each other. That's all stuff is all fine until they add this boost, and then every time they do that, they're getting a 30% speed increase, and it just leads to just absolutely ludicrous scenes.
Yeah, the map suddenly becomes so much smaller if you're Lucio, right? Because you can literally traverse it in a few seconds.
Yeah, it's around 6 seconds to get what would normally take someone just running, with Soldier 76 doing a sprint, something that would take them 15 or 20 seconds.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's the stacking, right?
It's the stacking that's the thing. Now, the thing is, it's super cool. It's super sweet.
Looks amazing.
It looks great. Yeah. If you've seen any of DSP Stanky's stuff, he's the kind of best Lucio in the world. Certainly the one with the most fame, who did all those videos about he was on console and then he came to PC and he was still great. Some of the stuff he's managed to do is just absolutely ludicrous. And it's really cool that is in there. And the challenge now for Blizzard is to keep that stuff as it is without making it so powerful that he's just breaking maps and they have to redesign everything around this super fast Lucio. And there are other changes as well. There are actually 2 nerfs in there.
Right. You never know it, but
yeah. To the size of his AoE healing and then the size of his ultimate. These are the things that needed to happen to make him reasonable, because the reason he was so ubiquitous and the reason that he was quite boring, and the way they put it was, look, we don't feel like he's impactful, was because you just sort of sat there. You had either your heal on to keep your team alive, and then when it was go time, you switched to speed, used the boost, so everyone was moving too quickly to be shot, and then that was the end of the game. And you don't feel like you did very much damage. You don't, really cool Lucios could do all this flippy stuff, but whether that was the most efficient way to play him or not, probably not.
Yeah.
So what they've done is they've made that stuff way better with the boosts and increasing the speed of his projectiles and that sort of thing. And they've nerfed the actual healing part, the actual support part of him. So, it's even possible that now he wouldn't be picked as a kind of pure support. So you'd have two other supports, maybe a Mercy and an Ana, and then you'd have this kind of Lucio that could keep individuals up using his heals now, because they've actually buffed how much they heal, just not the radius. And could do all this weird stuff and flank and use boots to get people off the map and that sort of thing.
Just keep tagging capture points when there's 1 second left to a nightmare sort of player. It begs the question, we've seen so often on the PTR lately, someone gets this mega buff that's incredibly fun to play if you're a main in that character, and then it becomes sensible again.
Yeah.
What would happen if all the mega buffs just remained and everyone was brought up to that level, and you've got Overwatch mega buff mode for everyone?
So there is a game that did this. Street Fighter 4 had a mode called a mega mode in its final version. It is. And that was just all the characters just turned it to 11, loads of stupid abilities. It was probably not balanced at all, but nobody really played it that seriously, so nobody ever discovered that. It was just this fun mode. Over the years, we've seen quite a few different changes. Like Zenyatta got nerfed quite heavily with his Discord orbs, and his healing orbs used to stay on people permanently. That was a change that they made because of hero stacking, which they've now removed from the game. There was also Widowmaker on launch. She did way more damage. They changed that because it just didn't feel very fair. But if you added all this stuff together, I do wonder what it would be like to play with all those changes in one. Like really powerful Ana that they've just nerfed, this version of Lucio.
Yeah. Mega Bastion.
Exactly. Yeah. A Bastion with 90% damage reduction half the time. Like, what would all that look like? A really fast D.Va. I'd be interested to see that. I expect it wouldn't be fun, is the answer. I expect it would be fun for a week.
Matches would be over just like that.
Yeah, exactly. And there are characters that have never been overpowered that wouldn't be good in those situations, and you'd have to buff them. True. And then how do you buff them? And it's not something that would be great now, but it's possible that in a year, after we've had a load more redesigns and more heroes have come in, if we keep all these buffed heroes, what would that be like?
Yeah.
And, I don't know.
The other much more boring scenario is what would have happened if none of these characters had ever had a buff, and it all just stayed the same as it was in June 2016.
Yeah, no, you don't want that.
Less entertaining, probably.
Exactly.
That's not all patch 1.10 does, though. There's also a fix to draws in certain scenarios, right?
Yeah, so this is something that the competitive community has been complaining about a lot. Draws aren't fun. You feel kind of like you wasted your time. A lot of people have said they'd rather get a loss, because then at least something has happened, something has changed.
Yeah.
They've been punished for poor play, or they've been rewarded for good play or whatever. So they're the system they have now should basically mean there are never any draws at all. What they've made it is so that no matter however much you've captured a point is recorded. Mm-hmm. So even if you don't fully capture a point, if you got it 23% of the way, then the opposing team, when they come to capture that point, just needs to get above 23%. They've actually done it that granularly, so it doesn't go by the thirds. When you capture a point and then you capture it halfway, it only goes back to a third. They haven't done it by that. They've done it by percentage, and it means that if you go to, if you don't manage to cap the point at all the enemy has to do is get someone on it when none of your team is on it, and get even 0.5% captured, and then they will win that round and probably that game. That is slightly weird. It looks like they've preempted people saying that the thirds isn't enough, and now people are saying, oh no, I think the thirds would be fine. So it's possible this will be changed again. That would lead to more draws, obviously, but it would still cut them down significantly. And it's just about, because if you only need 1%, there are certain strategies you can do that are completely unconventional and quite hard to counter, that are just run somebody to the point as fast as possible and hope that the opposing team isn't standing on it.
Yeah, probably Lucio, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, either a Lucio or a Tracer, for example.
Yeah.
So they might change that. We'll see, but it is definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Still no buffs for Soldier or for D.va. Far.
So people definitely want Soldier to be brought down a bit. He's getting, he does too much damage, basically. And D.va, people want to see her buffed, like you said, because she was kind of quite powerful, and then they nerfed her a bit. And then everybody thinks she needs buffed, and the development team are just kind of she can do stuff, stop hating. And this is kind of part of the problem where basically there are now enough heroes that even if you have two teams that are relatively diverse, you're still only looking at 9 or 10 heroes across the meta out of 25. So people are really being left in the dirt there, and it isn't oh, this character has 30% use rate. It's these 6 characters have a massive use rate, and these 4 have a little use rate, and then these guys have absolutely none at all.
Yeah.
So maybe there'll be some changes to them, in patch 111. And I would say Reinhardt is the last character, or certainly the top of the list now, that is totally ubiquitous in his role. Orisa might change that, which is probably why they haven't done anything to him yet. But they touched Ana for similar reasons. They're now doing stuff to Lucio for similar reasons. I would expect Reinhardt changes to come slightly after that. Again, maybe in patch 111 or even maybe patch 112.
Back in the realm of the reasonable, patch 1.9 brings Orisa.
Yep,
she is now available to all.
Hooray.
And she's an interesting blend, I think, of Bastion and Reinhardt, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. She's not as powerful of either of those in their specific roles, and she has some uniqueness to her, but she can put out a serious amount of damage. She has a fairly similar gun, high clip, does a lot of damage at range. particularly to old Bastion. Newer Bastion, is a little less. And yeah, she has a shield that she can put out and has a certain amount of health. The team can stand behind it. Really excited to see what she does, to be honest. Like, we don't have... She's like the character that is closest to Reinhardt, and I think Reinhardt was one of the characters that had the fewest analogs. Like, Tracer and Reaper are very, very different, but they have similar roles. As in, they get close and they blow people up.
Yeah.
They have very powerful AoE ultimates. Reinhardt was quite singular in being a tank that you could just stand behind, and again, that's how they describe it. They call it this anchor tank, where she becomes the center of the team.
Yeah.
She's someone to stand around and can help people that way. Pretty excited to see how she does. She's not going to be in the competitive mode for the first week. Looks like that's how they're going to run that sort of thing from now on, just to stop people kind of just jumping into competitive, having no idea what they're doing, and throwing a match effectively for their team because they haven't had any experience whatsoever on the character. Whether that's actually going to be fixed, because people can just do that next week instead, we don't know. But what it should hopefully mean is that these people, maybe spend at least a couple of hours in quick play, so they at least understand what her buttons do. She's not like the most complex character, but they'll understand how her alt fire works, like how much range it has on its pulling beam, how you actually activate it, where it's good to use it, whether she can do X amount of damage or whether she loses in a 1v1 against this hero or this hero, exactly how her fortify works, because that's quite complicated. So hopefully that should lessen the issue, but you're never going to get rid of that completely, and it's always going to be a little bit of a mess when a new patch comes out, not least because of all the other changes as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because she is a fairly sort of simple character in terms of what she does and what she's there for, but in terms of her character design, it's quite complicated because she has all these extra limbs, and it reminds me of 2D fighting games like BlazBlue and Guilty Gear. There are these really complex and unpredictable characters whose animations all start and end in weird places because they're sort of purposely hard to counter, and that's important in the genre. When you go through Orisa's gestures, there's an element of that because she's got all these surprising limbs. Be interested to see that feedback into the gameplay. But of course, what she does in the game is hold a gun and shoot that gun
and put a shield down,
throw something on the floor,
become invulnerable. And I think it is a deliberate decision on the character side because she's very young in terms of her actual character. She's only been in existence, and okay, she's an AI, so it's not like it's just a child, but it is quite a childlike being within this kind of massive security robot. And I think that is deliberate, and the idea of the animations, her being unsure in her form and that sort of thing, is super interesting. And it's a shame that doesn't carry over into the gameplay a little bit more.
Yeah, plenty of room for development though. It's early days for Orisa at the moment. We'll cut her some slack for now. Orisa's not the only story in patch 1.9 though. We've seen some buffs elsewhere that will have an impact on competitive play, Ben. Yeah,
so this stuff they haven't delayed. This is just all live for everybody. The Ana nerfs are in. It's actually only ended up with one nerf overall, which is to her biotic grenade damage. Zenyatta's buffs are in. Those are fairly minor, but interesting to see how that changes him. Winston as well, he's had that minor buff where his shield kind of works more like everybody else's, and it gives him a little more, basically, uptime on that shield. And also Sombra's buffs are in, and those are definitely the biggest in terms of how many changes are being made to one character. Exactly how impactful they are, we don't yet know. But it should, be fairly interesting to see how these things move stuff around. Hopefully a few people experiment and don't just kind of stick with Ana, Lucio, Soldier 76, etc. comps. I'm really excited to see how these changes do. I would really like it for Sombra to be a viable character, a more viable character, just because she's more interesting than a lot of the other characters. Like we were saying with how Reinhardt doesn't really have an analog, I feel like Sombra doesn't have much of an analog elsewhere. And if they can make that work, that'd be really good because it opens up all sorts of options for characters that aren't just about doing a certain amount of damage to a character's head or whatever. So all those changes are now live. Go play them. Let us know what you think, and we'll talk about that. I expect more next week.
That'll do it for this episode of Overwatch. Our 25 episode anniversary.
It's so good to be here.
Wonderful. Join us next week where we'll be talking about further 1.10 patch changes and the fallout from Orisa's debut.